Hey, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to share with you 4 of the warning signs of nightmare clients, what you can do to protect yourself, and how to respond when you get in a bad situation. As a business owner, your top priority is always to keep the lights on, to have a steady stream of income, which means landing clients through effective sales and marketing. Especially as a young business, there's a lot at stake and the pressure is on to find clients quickly, or else, for some, it could mean going back to a 9-to-5 job. When you're starting out, you also need to build a portfolio of work, gain experience working with clients, and build your creative and technical skills. So the temptation is to accept any and every job that comes your way and overlook any warning signs of nightmare clients that might be staring you right in the face. I know this because I've fallen in all of the traps over the years. I've been burnt financially and, on occasion, spent weeks navigating difficult situations that could have been avoided with the right advice. My goal today is to help make you more aware of what the warning signs of nightmare clients are, so you can spot them early on and use your time more effectively on projects that aren't going to suck up your time and steer you off course. So to begin with, let's go over the common warning signs from which all the problems that I've experienced over the years have stemmed. The first is poor communication. We're all very familiar with personal situations where there's a breakdown in communication. For example, in a relationship where one person doesn't express what they mean, or something gets misinterpreted, or one person gets annoyed and just blocks the other. Well, in business, people are prone to the exact same human errors, except we have a tendency to try and tolerate it or simply ignore the warning signs because there's money involved. Can you remember the last time you asked a client to get back to you with an asset or feedback or to sign something off, and they either sidetracked your question or didn't respond at all? Signs of poor communication are actually very easy to spot, but they're even easier to ignore. One of the most common examples that I found early in my business is where a client would take days to respond to a message, only to then come back to me with answers from 5 or 6 different colleagues with conflicting ideas. Then, after finally deciding on what should be done and implementing the changes, they'd then follow up with more changes from other people who were on holiday at the time of the first message. Not only is it frustrating when this happens, but it puts the whole project in jeopardy, so you can't deliver on time and to the best of your ability. Your relationship with the client is the most important part of business, and if they don't trust, respect, or value your expertise and opinion from the start, then you're setting yourself up for failure. The cause of communication problems are usually rooted in how you set the frame at the beginning of the relationship. If you're perceived as just another supplier, like a videographer who's just there to shoot and edit and is easily replaceable, then the client is unlikely to treat you in such a way that enables you to do great work. Instead, you want to position yourself as an equal, a valued partner who's working with them on a business level and is there to help them get real business results. The second warning sign to look out for is when a client changes the scope of a project unexpectedly. To the inexperienced, this might just sound like the client's asking for something a little different to what was first agreed, or requiring a few extra deliverables out of the blue. We need a rough cut by the end of the week, or can you send us a 30-second edit for Instagram? Or can you take some stills from this for our social media? Or the all-time favourite, can you send us the raw files? To the uninitiated, these might sound like favours, but to an experienced business person, it's called changing the scope. As a business owner, you go to great lengths to negotiate a fair price and agree on the scope of the project before work begins. With any academic profession, you'd never expect to be able to change the scope of what was agreed in the middle of the project. You wouldn't ask your dentist in the middle of a filling to also put some retainers on while she's at it. Or the builder to add a conservatory since he's fitting the kitchen. Or a mechanic to fit tyres for free while he's changing the oil. In every other profession, you'd fully expect the professional to tell you that this is outside of what was agreed and they'll have to go back to the drawing board and price it up. Well, that's exactly what you should do as a creative business owner. However, for one reason or another, some clients view creative work differently and think asking for a change is as simple as pressing a button on the keyboard or a few extra clicks of the mouse. Keep an eye out for this warning sign and don't let yourself be on the receiving end of this, because while it may seem small at first, you set the standard for the rest of the relationship and it's only downhill from there. You need to find that balance of giving the client what they want while also setting clear boundaries with mutual respect. The third warning sign to look out for is micromanaging. When you boil it down, this is basically where a client is telling you how to do your job. This can range from a client telling you what shots to get, through to actually grabbing the camera on set and trying to do it themselves, and I've seen all of it. It's also a classic problem in the editing stage, where the client's asking for arbitrary or excessive changes. In theory, once the scope is agreed, the client shouldn't be telling you how to do your job at all, assuming they've hired you for your expertise and view you as a partner rather than an expendable supplier. Once again, you wouldn't tell a doctor or a dentist or a mechanic how to do his or her job, so don't let your clients do the same to you. This warning sign is a clear indication that there's been a serious breakdown in trust or respect, or that they were never there in the first place. Be sure to confront it straight on as soon as possible and be willing to let the client go if need be. If you can't value yourself, then your clients won't either. The fourth warning sign is indecisiveness. The best projects I've worked on started out where the client was certain of what they needed. They knew that there was a problem to be solved and that a solution had to be found. Everything moves forward quickly and efficiently because there's a clear outcome in mind. It's your job as the business owner to help them find effective solutions, and it's their job to decide whether or not they trust you and want to work with you. Then accept your advice and take decisive action on it. This comes with 10 years of experience, but what I found is that I can tell which clients are going to be good to work with from the outset based on how decisive they are. It doesn't mean that they think they have all the answers, rather they know there's a problem that needs solving and they have a get shit done attitude. Sure, sometimes they need a little bit of convincing in the early stages to make sure that you're all on the same page, but that's what the first meeting is for. If the client can't make up their mind by the end of the second meeting, or ideally by the end of the first, then it's a warning sign of what's to follow. And it might not be that they're at fault, rather it could just be a warning sign that you're simply not a good fit to do business together. So now you know some of the big warning signs. Are there any you've experienced already? And what was your response? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. In the meantime, I'd like to share some ideas on what you can do to protect yourself from these warning signs and nightmare clients. How do you respond when confronted with one? And when is it better to cut your losses and leave? The first thing you can do to protect yourself is make sure you set the frame when going into any business relationship. Setting the frame is where you proactively establish the terms of engagement and the nature of your relationship with the client. It's often overlooked, and if you don't do it, the chances are you'll fall into the employer and subcontractor relationship by default. When this happens, you aren't going to be valued as an equal partner, and you'll be more prone to all four of the warning signs that I listed earlier. So what can you do to set the frame? Well, at the beginning of the first meeting, I like to say this. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me today. The purpose of this meeting is to see if there's a good fit between our companies to do business together. I saw some potential, and so I'd like to have this conversation to see if our interests align. Does that sound okay with you? In saying this, you're clearly establishing the purpose of the meeting and the nature of the relationship, avoiding the employer-subcontractor default. You're being selective by saying that you're there to see if there's a good fit, rather than coming across desperate or pitching for their work. So you'll increase the chances they'll respect you and not waste your time. And saying that you care about whether or not your interests align helps build mutual trust. It's a simple but effective introduction that I use in all my meetings and is worth memorizing. The next thing you can do to protect yourself from nightmare clients is be crystal clear about the scope of the work. In some instances, clients will just try and take advantage, perhaps as a power move or to feel like they're getting their money's worth. Other times, it's a case of good intentions but a lack of communication that could have been avoided. I know that from my own experience, early on in my business, I didn't take enough time to clarify the scope, partly out of ignorance and partly because I was too worried about sending them anything too formal, like a contract that might put them off. What happened on at least one occasion was that midway through the project, the client tried to change the scope of what I thought was agreed. But because it wasn't set out clearly enough in writing, I didn't have anything to fall back on. So what did I do to fix this? Well, nowadays there are two simple but very essential steps that I follow with every client, and you can too. The first step is send a clear summary email after each important meeting. It only takes a few minutes to recap, and I'll tell the client that it's a summary for both our benefit. Then I'll just use bullet points to outline what was discussed or agreed. It may feel a bit repetitive at the time considering you've just spoken about it, but those words can be worth their weight in gold further down the line when you need to check on something or if a dispute starts to form. It can also just be helpful to get clear on your own ideas by writing things down. The second step is to send a terms and conditions sheet before starting work. Rather than sending an overly formal contract, I found a term sheet to be the perfect balance between formal and friendly. It can be as little as 1 page, though mine is 3, and it details exactly what the scope of the project is, what your obligations are, and what the client's obligations are. It's not just about what you need to deliver, it's also about making sure that the client is aware of what they need to do to ensure the project is a success. This is especially useful for combating the warning signs of trying to change the scope of the project, indecisiveness, and poor communication. I'll also cover the finer details like data storage for the project files, who owns the raw media, and use of work for promotional purposes. It's also not necessary to get them to physically sign anything, although I do for larger projects. Simply getting clear written confirmation from the client that they agree with the terms is enough to be legally binding, but most importantly, it's there to refer back to later in the project when needed. The third thing you absolutely must learn to do as a business owner to protect yourself from nightmare clients is learn when to say no. When you first start out, it may seem hard to say no to anything and feel necessary to take on every opportunity that comes your way so you can build a network and a portfolio. Blair Enns, author of Pricing Creativity, explains that there are 2 levels to a business. At the first level, a business owner must put in extensive hard work and say yes to almost everything. This may work to begin with, but it won't be the same thing that works later on. When a business owner graduates to the second level, hard work is no longer the key to growth, and they must learn to say no to almost everything. Many business owners get stuck on the first level and frustrated because they don't know how to move on to the second. The first level is a necessary part of learning to run a business, and don't be disheartened if you're there right now, but aim to get through it and onto the second level as quickly as possible. In the early years of my business, I spent too long on the first level because I wasn't responding to the warning signs with a no. Instead, I was acting from scarcity. Without enough good leads and clients, I felt like I couldn't justify saying no when I needed the cash. As a result, I ended up with nightmare clients and learnt the hard way. Learning to say no is one of the most important things that you can do as a business owner. In the words of Warren Buffett, really successful people say no to almost everything. In my free 1-hour training that I link below, I go into greater detail on these topics and offer up some simple but effective exercises that you can try that will help you become better at knowing when to say no and avoid nightmare clients. I also go into detail on how to land clients, tips for running a more effective business, how to price your services, and many of the lessons that I've learned over 10 years in business. I hope you found this video useful, and check out the free training if you want to learn more. Let me know in the comments what experiences you've had with nightmare clients, and if there's anything you found helpful when it comes to avoiding them. Thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.